recording.
There we go. Okay, thanks. Hello, I'm Valerie Keenest from the Seattle Design Commission. This is our May 1st, 2025 meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. We will be recording the meeting. On the agenda today is a briefing by Jason Huff from the Office of Arts and Culture on a model they're piloting to engage planning artists early in the process of developing capital improvement projects. After Jason's presentation, we'll have time for discussion with him. This is an informal conversation. We are not taking an action today, commissioners. And we're going to open it up to, because we have a lot of participants here in the room and online, to discussion with everyone, but just try to prioritize commissioners if possible. Anyone who's online and wants to raise their hand or wants to speak, please use the raise hand function. And let's see, before I hand it over to Jason, let's do introductions. We'll do introductions of commissioners in the room, then online, and then the team can introduce yourselves. So let's start with Ray.
Ray Gastel, Planning Commissioner.
I'm wearing my official artist hat. I just put a beret on because I'm Kate Clark. I'm the art commissioner, but I'm here in collaboration with the project team.
We need a hologram.
Good morning, Brian Markham, Engineering Commission.
Good morning, Molly Spitalnik, Urban Design
Good morning,
Commission.
anymore. I just
Good
realized I
afternoon.
screwed up.
I was going to correct that in my, good afternoon. I'm Kevin O'Neill, Transportation Planning Commissioner and Chair.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Trump. Pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner.
My name's Ben Giss, and I'm the Architect Commissioner.
And then Phoebe.
Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Architect Commissioner.
And
Zubin
then-
Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
And then Robin staff.
Robin McGonigal, staff for the Design Commission.
And then we'll toss it over to you guys for introductions.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Huff, he, him pronouns. I'm the program manager for the public art program here in the city of Seattle.
I'm Andy Carson, I'm with the Seattle Public Utilities. I'm the project manager for the Bitter Lake Reservoir project.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we can do introductions in the room if you want to.
We're going to post the Office of the Waterfront Civic Projects and Sound Transit.
Barbara Lukey, Sound Transit, oversee the art program, looking forward to what you're going to say, Jason.
Kurt Kiefer, also with the Sound Transit Art Program.
I am Director of the Office of Arts and Culture.
I am Debbie Allen, Office of Planning and Community Development.
Amy Sun, Office of Planning and US Designer and Community Engagement.
Amy Nguyen, Office of Planning and Community Development, Deputy Director.
I'm Erica Bush, Office of Community Planning and Development. I'm a planner and urban designer.
Thanks.
Okay, I think you guys can get set up here. Okay, well, thank you for allowing us to be here today. This is, we're here to talk about our planning artist model that we've incorporated in the public art program a number of years ago for a few projects, and something we're quite proud of. You know, it's been a lot of work kind of putting it all together, but I mean, the idea was to, you know, how do we have more meaningful engagement with communities that we are working in? And I should say, for one, this is not something that we created. I mean, this is something that is just called good community engagement. It's been happening for forever. But I think it's just how we've incorporated into our process of how we develop public art projects. And so, yeah, let's here to talk about that and a few examples that we've done over the last few years. I'm just going to start off with what kind of led our office into doing this work. There was a public art conference years ago, and we were in Pittsburgh, and we were it was a discussion by an artist, Edith Abeta, who was working with Pittsburgh Office of Public Art, Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, and the Heinz Endowments. And this is sort of a cautionary tale of, because these are all things have happened to all of us as we worked in communities. The Heinz Foundation, I've worked with Pittsburgh to do a number of public art project grants for public art projects. And the first year they did it, they kind of went with the standard public art. We'll have an open call. They brought in artists that were not from Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania, and they had kind of a thing where the artists kind of came in and just were interested in doing their own thing, not so much working with community. And it ended up in a disaster, again, just community harm. Okay, next year we're going to change it up. We're going to do it a little differently. And it's where you overcompensate of like, this time we're going to fix it and we're going to work with a local artist. So they worked with an artist, the name escapes me right now, the neighborhood that I worked in, Hazelwood. And they got an artist from that community. However, he was a studio painter, did not have experience working with communities, ended up being a disaster. So 2 years of failures. And so the third year, they really kind of rethought, like, how are we going to do this? And that's when they brought in the Carnegie Library as a partner in this process. And so library, and the thing about libraries, which is great, is because you have individuals in there who are just really committed to communities and who really, really want to help folks. And so the library was like, yeah. So we can hold workshops and classes here, but we want to be part of the selection process, because if we're going to work with this artist, we want to have some say in who that person is. So they did commission Edith Abeta. And for this one, they changed it up. It was like, okay, just spend a year working with the community. They've had 2 years of harm that was created, just sort of get a sense and sort of develop a project based on what you experience with working through them through the year. And so after a year, with working, I had workshops in the library, and Edith had gone to so what kind of project do you want to do? And the community was like, because it's a low-income community, it's like, we just don't feel that we have access to art. We don't feel welcome in museums or galleries. So it'd be great if we could just see art. And it's like, okay. And worked with Pittsburgh Public Art Office and the Heinz, and then this is what they want. And it's like, okay, do it. And that kind of really kind of struck me. I'm like, oh yeah, just listen to people. Maybe that can influence how you go about doing your projects. And so, you can go online here. The project was, I think it ended in 22 or 23, but she took them all to different, like the Mattress Factory in Pittsburgh, and they went to Falling Water, and even went to DC to look at the museums there. And so it was a really incredible project to really kind of see what you can do when you finally listen to people. So our office, the public art program, is guided by the 1% for Art ordinance, and it's where the city accepts responsibility for expanding public's experience with visual art. I think this is an incredible document or incredible ordinance. I sort of put it at the same level as national parks, because here government has taken it upon themselves to create experiences for folks that is free from capital and corporate interests. And this sort of guides our work of where we really think about the public. And I think a lot of, with public art agencies, we focus on the artists, we focus on the artwork, and we tend to sometimes forget that we are there to serve the public. And so a lot of this, I'm going to embarrass her, but a lot of this work comes out to Ruri Yampolsky, who is who led the program for many years, who incredible guidance for the program, who really kind of drilled into the staff about the importance of we work for the public, and kind of really made that central to our work. And I think, in the 2010s, when we were talking about race and social justice and how we can evolve our program to kind of help, work with communities of color, marginalized communities. She really kind of guided us and kind of helped us kind of take some agency here and come up with ideas of what we can do. And so, she was great in really fostering those discussions, and definitely deserves a lot of credit for the work that we're doing now. And so, thank you.
It's all staff.
We're standing on the shoulders of giants. So the program today is definitely, living in the shadow that Ruri has cast. So again, kind of thinking about, how we work with how our projects work typically, and sort of how we're trying to change it. So a lot of the commissions that we do, we work with Seattle Public Utilities, SDOT, City Light. It's, like, we have this project going on. It's like, okay, where are you? We're 30%. Okay. Sometimes it's 60%. I was like, ugh. And so it really never gives us a lot of opportunities to really work with communities, because at this point it's like, well, when are you going to be at 90%? 6 months. Okay. And we haven't even started our process of selecting an artist. And so usually when we come in at 30 to 60%, the artist only has 1 or 2 project organized community engagement opportunities. And usually, they're very open house type style. And so, we get a little table somewhere and kind of talk about the art. But even then, the artist is just there to introduce themselves, glean whatever they can from the community, and then get to work. You have to design a project. And then usually if your second meeting, it's more of like just showing them like, hey, this is what I came up with. And then, again, given schedules, artists can have 1 to 4 months, or maybe sometimes longer, to develop these designs for their projects. And so again, it doesn't really foster that meaningful engagement. And of course, outreach opportunities tend to favor privileged households. People who have time, access, privilege to go to this open house on a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And artists that we work with, some of them, community engagement is central to their work. And so it's always been part of it. So Horatio Law, South Park Vortex, is an artwork where we worked with the South Park Library. I think what's really beautiful about this piece is that he was trying to talk about the cycle of water in the Northwest. And he had community create, little snowflakes that he was going to have these etched into these glass discs. He had one workshop with the library. They just said, like, when can I come back and have a second one? They were like, oh, we got this, don't worry about it. And I think like 2 days later, they just said, we're done. Because they were able to really connect with the community, and they got all the snowflakes produced for him. And so this piece, which we were sort of nervous about, because are those glass discs going to get shattered? And it's not been touched. Also, Ryan Feddersen, who's currently, still waiting on installation for her piece for the Ship Canal with SPU in Wallingford. She went to like Fremont Solstice Parade and had booths and a number of community events, and just worked with folks to kind of think about how do you touch the drainage and wastewater? What is your influence? What impact are you having? So kind of looking at from brushing your teeth, doing your laundry, washing your car, all kind of really connecting folks to like, what is their impact? So it's sort of in that piece to kind of show like, think about what you do. And so I figure like 2017, 2018, we decided to kind of try out this model that Edith Beta had kind of introduced us to. And we did a project with SDOT and with SPU for 23rd Ave corridor improvements, which were new water main. And so Elishba Johnson, who is the head of Wanawari, was a project manager who worked with Jill Friedberg, Rachel Kessler, and Inya Wakoma to do a lot of this initial community engagement work. And so, again, same thing as finding events that are already happening within the community. Again, we already have an audience. So tap into that. So a number of events where people were encouraged to talk about, their experience with the CD. And because it was SPU, we had to, include water. It's the whole slew, very, very complicated story about how our work, how we have to work. But it was all about really because, the issues with gentrification and erasure of really working with community to kind of make sure that we capture, the Black experience in this community, making sure that it's not lost, making sure that it remains present and in our public sphere. Having, projections of really getting people to really think about, how they grew up, where they grew up, remember that store, mapping how they moved through the community, of really just showing that connection. And then also here where they had, questionnaires for folks, when I think of water, so really these prompts to help, again, make those connections. And so with the work that they had done throughout that year, led to like a project where talking with folks, like what kind of artwork project do you want? Do you want a temporary project or permanent? Permanent came out because again, with erasure, it's like temporary project kind of like, oh yeah, you only think we're here for a few more minutes, as opposed to no, we are here. And so they wanted a permanent project. They asked for it to be placed on 23rd Avenue, MLK, by the African American Museum. And so they commissioned Melvin Freeman, who captured photographs from folks in the community who kind of, again, giving their history with the space, with their families, with their friends. And then he created, Central District here in porcelain enamel. And then thinking of, the garden hose. I mean, those of us who grew up in before, during the 80s and 70s, it was, drinking from water hoses with sizable, and just, spraying ourselves with water. That was, again, harkening back to that time of just like what it meant. So, yeah, it was great that we were able to do this project that could really speak to community and community history and culture and just remembering that. We had a second project, Spruce Street Mini Park, also in the Central District, where we worked with Hassan Kirkland and Damon Brown as community engagement artists. Of course, the issue here was this was July 2020. So it kind of impacted how we could engage with community. Parks and Rec, who we partnered with on this, had already started conducting online meetings and mailers to folks to kind of get impressions on, because it was a play structure, they were redoing the play structure, but number of folks had indicated that they wanted some art within the park space. So we worked with Damon and Hassan, who, again, working the best they could given the situation of, that first summer of COVID. Working, we did video meetings, again, tapping into more mailers. They were asked questions. And so, sorry for all the text here, but, this scope of work that came up, right, we went into the artist call, came from community. They told us where they wanted the art. And then these were what they wanted to see. Definitely a connection to the community. History of all the ethnicities that had lived in that space, and even and even to be a part of the artwork installation too. And so this was the wall that the community had identified as being a problem because it's tagged a lot. It was an issue for us because it's private property, so we had to figure out ways to negotiate that. We had the owner of that building was a great partner in this. She was willing to have it available for the community, and we had to make the community aware of the expectations that this is private property, could be sold. Mm-hmm. So just be aware. And they accepted that. And so Ari Glass and was the artist for this, along with his partner escapes me. But yeah, this was a work, and they worked with local kids to do some of the flowers. And they also kind of the stairwell on the north end of the park too, and also by the play area. So it was, again, another project that, again, really kind of got the inspiration from community. And, you know, when the dedication, it's just amazing to see the smiles on people's faces, because this is something that they built. And then this is kind of the last one that we have just been working on, and probably have Andy Karch and Kate here, is for the Bitter Lake Reservoir project. So it's quite a large project. And we thought that this was a good candidate for the planning artist model. SPU has been really great with us for a number of years. They for years when we work with SPU, I mean, they truly understand what art can do for their projects, because most of their work's invisible. And so it helps tell their story. They see that art is important for them. And so they've really embraced our program and really incorporated. So when we have new ideas, they're always willing to kind of like, yeah, let's try it. So with this one, it was, a huge project. It was going to take many years. So we knew that we had time. So we could take time to get a planning artist, drop them into the Bitter Lake community for a year to start connecting with folks and sort of getting a sense and making them aware of the project. I had managed a project also in the Bitter Lake neighborhood down the road by the community center for the interurban bike trail. And we did a lot of community engagement work with that. And, you can see the demographics here of that community. And while we were working on the SDOT, but a lot of them were voicing their frustration with SPU because of the reservoir. Because at this time, remember, all the reservoirs were being lidded and turned into parks. And so for them, it was like, why is Maple Leaf, Capitol Hill, why are they getting nice parks and we're not getting one? And it was like, so remembering that, this kind of, helping shape how we did this, of knowing that this is really important for a community, and one that has a lot of BIPOC folks, low income, refugees, a lot of elderly. It's like, we really should do something for these communities that, can't lawyer up and force, the city to create all these amenities. And so this is my last slide. I'm going to pass it off. Kate Clark, who again is on the commission, in full disclosure, she was hired before she joined the design commission, but was hired as the engagement artist. And so, just seeking opportunities for her to engage with community and to, again, make them aware and to see how they could help shape how the artwork, what the artwork could be for this. But then I think it became, it did become a lot more than just the art. And so, talking through this, if you want to, or I can navigate through here while you talk.
Cool. So my role as a community engagement artist for this project was to, as Jason was mentioning, there's this huge new community asset of this new large public park in this neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of public parks. So all of a sudden there's going to be 7 new acres of space for people to have in a neighborhood that's 86% renters. So people are going to have a new backyard, basically. And with this investment of funding into public art, it's like, okay, how can we have conversations with people so the art can reflect the various groups and neighbors and who live there, so they feel like it's their space, since it's going to be new in so many ways. And so what I did was to kind of, I'm not from Bitter Lake, but I have a family friend who lives there, kind of an auntie figure who lives at the Shag, which is an urban senior living apartments. But also working to kind of identify who are some of the other people that live close by to that space. And some of the groups that were mentioned when we were first beginning to do outreach through surveys through the city of Seattle, as Jason kind of alluded to, a lot of the first round of feedback we got was from homeowners. So, and predominantly white homeowners. So not representative of the neighborhood. So we knew we had to take a different approach than just kind of sitting back and like waiting for people to tell us what we needed to hear. And one thing that the homeowners were expressing concern about was the number of unhoused people that were camping on the location, and concerns about drug use, concerns kind of about those people, like that kind of. And there were some, there are many concerns expressed from different angles, but one thing we learned from those conversations was one community we needed to outreach with was the North Star Permanent Supportive Housing, which was first time apartments for folks to live in right on the corner of the park. So they and meeting with people there, they were expressing the same concerns. So it was like, it's interesting, through these conversations, it became very clear that everybody had a lot of vested interest in wanting this to be a beloved community space. Working with the Office of Arts and Culture, Jason helped connect me to an incredible artist in the neighborhood, Abraham Awalom, who has a lot of connections with the Eritrean and Ethiopian communities. And so basically, what I was doing for about a year was to have conversations with people about stories, themes, sensory information that they wanted the artwork to connect to. I'm trying to kind of set the scene for material to then develop calls that then other artists could participate in. My work branched a little bit after we came to the Seattle Design Commission. When was that, Andy?
At least a year or two.
Yeah, so I can talk about that, but that's kind of like a general information about some of the outreach. You can see there's an image of a model that I was using to play with people that was to scale of the site with kinetic sand and miniature model railroad figures that were the size of how people would be on the site. That I can talk more about why I was using it, but yeah, I think that's the start. Maybe next slide.
Yeah.
Thanks. Oh yeah. So from I ended up from talking with people kind of earlier on, like probably about a little over 100 people. I was trying to get a range of like qualitative narrative information from people, as well as like some quantitative information about how to direct the focus of how we should craft these calls for artists to be involved with. So what kind of rose to the surface was people really from all the groups really reinforced that they really wanted the artwork on site to bring more community engagement and activity, which is a tried and true solution to having a place feel more safe and like it belongs to you, is if you see lots of people moving around it and spending time in there. Secondly, people really wanted the artwork to represent the diversity of the neighborhood. A lot of people talked about how they wanted the art to talk about the water story on the site. Many people didn't even know there was a reservoir there. And to talk about the history of this location and what it was before and what it may be in the future. So you can see an image there on the right. One of the questions that we were talking about as a project team was there's going to be all of this excess soil from digging the reservoir. And so one idea that I'm trying to remember, Andy, who floated it initially.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
We're coming up maybe after our first design commission or right around that time.
I'm not sure. I think it was before someone brought up the idea, what if we sculpted some of this excess soil into some landforms that people could play on? So part of the role of having this model with kinetic sand was to shape these forms with people, to talk about what would be some fun shapes to play on. What kind of a space would you want to run through or roll down or rest on? So that's what a lot of the model had to do, as well as talking about just how people would want to circulate through the park, or where they would want artwork to be placed. So one example is a man named Wende from that was friends with Abraham was saying, I would love to have a big graphic large sculpture that my family and I could use for family photos. We have lots of weddings, we have lots of celebrations, and a lot of the time we go to nearby parks to do these photos. So if we can have something that's close by for parties, that we can have our wedding photos in front of, that'd be wonderful. And that actually informed one of the future calls that we put out with the Office of Arts and Culture. Next slide, please. So we presented our project, and Andy, feel free to jump in at any point. We presented the Bitter Lake project to the Seattle Design Commission, and one of the recommendations you all made was to really focus on integrating community feedback into SPU's designs. Since this was a new opportunity in this neighborhood, and there's really wonderful precedents of incredibly rich reservoir parks in other locations of the city. So that was one point you all made. And then as well to continue working on finding ways to integrate art and enhancements into the site outside of the Percent for Art. As I recall, a former commissioner alluded to, because this is a site where we need to protect the water, there's a lot of fencing. And so one commissioner asked, is there a way that you could reduce the militaristic aesthetic of the fencing around this? And so that also became an opportunity to think about how design could make it feel like a more hospitable feature. So I, outside of working as a community engagement artist, also then began to work with the design team to kind of think about more formally how we could make those landforms and do some fencing artwork. And then we started to really drill down based off of all of the community feedback on what type of art calls we should make. So we put out 4 calls through the public art roster. And those calls were one, to have some large element of that was at the top point of where people would walk, called Lookout Point Rewards. Another artwork called Park Gateway, so something that's kind of a welcoming threshold, iconic artwork. Another thing that helped people circulate through the space called Pathway Breadcrumbs. And then artwork that lived inside of the bioretention gardens. And those artworks were also voted on by community members. So I went back and shared kind of a menu of potential projects, and those 4 that you saw were the ones that people wanted the most. So these are, I don't know, Jason, if you want to speak at any point, but so basically we went through a selection process of artists. We had, I think, 3 community members on the panel. And so now we have 4 artists that are working in real time on these public art commissions. And it's kind of incredible to see how each 4 of these artists have really metabolized the themes and desires addressed in those early conversations, and it's really shaped some of their designs and the narratives that they're focusing on in their artwork. And part of that is either slide is fine, is again, to keep looping back with community then is for them to be selected artists to have workshops that help generate even more specific imagery, words and themes to incorporate in their designs. So for example, Lauren Ida, she is the artist that's working on the Pathway Breadcrumbs project. So it's ground plane artworks that are going to be embedded in the trails that move through this park. And she's been hosting these memory net workshops. She just hosted one at the Permanent Housing Center, North Star, where people tell her specific objects or images that connect them to their sense of home in that neighborhood. And she cuts it into paper, and that will be translated into water jet aluminum or metal that will then be embedded into the ground plane. So some of it is very direct in terms of how those conversations are taking place in these workshops. Next slide, please.
So, yeah, again, for those that don't know me, I'm Andy Karch. I'm Seattle Public Utilities Project Manager for the Bitter Lake Reservoir Project. So this is actually my first project that included 1% for art. So I was really excited to have art be part of my project. And when I first got involved with it, the idea of the plane artist came up. I'm like, wow, you know, that sounds great. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, what does this exactly mean? How is this going to go, right? And now that we've got through about 3 years of design, we're like, actually tomorrow is supposed to be the end of our design period. It's really, I can really say it's been a rewarding experience. It's really been beneficial to the team and everyone. And there's a lot of benefits that came from it, but I really just want to focus on 3 of those benefits in this presentation today. So one is just exemplifying the One Seattle vision, enhancing the community outreach, and also connecting to the design initiative. So then right from the start, since, you know, I was coordinating with the arts department, they were involved with the project. And then we got Kate commissioned. She really integrated into our project teams. She was in our monthly design meetings. And also we had an interdepartmental team that involved SPU, SPR, DON, and arts. And then we knew from the start that since we really had kind of 4 projects here, we had the reservoir project, the art project, the park, and an expansion for the P-patch, that the community is really going to be viewing that as one project, as one city. So we knew that we really had to embrace our connectedness as departments and really work as one team, not separate departments. And that's kind of what we did. And it was really beneficial, I think, to the community and our community outreach and also to the departments. And in doing this, we were really able to build these strong relationships like across the department lines. And really led, I think, to a positive and really successful project. And then using this community or this planning artist model, I think it really increased the effectiveness of our outreach. Right from the start, Kate was able to work individually with workshops for the different community groups, such as the Bitter Lake P-patch Gardeners, SHAG, and Urban Senior Living. And doing this, she built relationships with the community right from the start. And this could really be seen when we had larger group outreach events, when a lot of the people that were coming to those events already knew about the project and working with Kate, and they're really able to contribute to the conversations that were happening and provide really valuable feedback about all the projects. At the same time, too, since she wasn't city staff, that she was working with us, she could reach out to other groups such as the North Star Permanent Supportive Housing, and just her going out there, it kind of opened them up more, and they were able to share more than, say, if I was there, you know, the project manager from the city being there. So I thought that was a really great aspect. And also it really added the artist lens to the project. So as we were going out to community, like I mentioned, we had these 4 different projects going on, and having that artist lens out there kind of really connected everything together, kind of really made it this holistic feel of kind of what we were doing out at the project site. And I think it was really beneficial to the community as they were kind of looking at this. It's like they weren't just like, here's a tank we're going to put in the ground, here's a park, right? It's like this whole thing that the city was doing to benefit them. And then when we did go to the design commission, one of the key takeaways my team took away from that was that the reservoir is viewed as civic architecture. And with this, that we had to connect the park and the community in a really meaningful way. And so this is something my team really took to heart when we're looking at the reservoir and looking at the site. And even though our reservoir, because of the engineering design, there wasn't a lot that we could do with that. We really could use those site elements to really enhance that connection with the community and their experience out there and the connection with the park. And this is one of the ways that I think the planning artist role really came into play. That Kate was able to collaborate with our landscape architect and with our designer and really connect that our utility need with the need of the community. So we really could connect those two, which was really successful and it really led to these cool art enhancements that we came up with and working with the design commission as a partner, right? We came up with this fencing, like Kate alluded to, the military style fencing. So one thing with our fencing, we looked at this art enhancement and we're able to connect that defensive mechanism with this shoot seed word for Bitter Lake, whereas this black caps on the side, which if you think of like Bitter Lake and these used to be these native blackberries around it. Now we have this reservoir. It's kind of like these blackberries around it with our artistic resemblance of that. So that was really awesome. And Kate learning about that story and being able to connect it to the reservoir and site and the history of the land as well from our first people that were here. And also another thing we worked on was this that Kate had alluded to earlier was the sculpting of the earth around this. We had a lot of additional soil on the site that we were trying to figure out what to do. We came up with this idea, well, we could use that, to connect the land with the reservoir and make some artistic mounds, make something that's like visually cool to look at, cool for like adults and kids to play with and stuff. So that was really, really exciting.
Thank you, Kate, Andy. Appreciate it. Great partnership. We're working together with you on this. So what's next for us? Well, we have a couple of projects that we are working again with SPU for the California Culvert Replacement Project, as well as the South Park Water Quality Project. And started talking with some of my teammates. It was like, because we have an artist roster, which is over 400 artists in different disciplines. And we also have a category for planning artists. And, with these projects and others, like knowing that, we're going to eventually run out of planning artists. So we should think about, some sort of training that we can do to kind of help people kind of get into this, of learning, how to work with communities effectively and help draw out and create, a much more cohesive planning process. So that's something that we're sort of thinking about and sort of going from there. And then, kind of the takeaways that we have from this. The big thing is, give thoughtful consideration for the methodology of your approach. I mean, it's not a one size fits all. Every community is different. They have different needs. They had a different history. And so you really have to just go in there and know that you're going to make meaningful change and that you really need to do your homework. Take the time to build trust. Like Andy had mentioned, it's like because Kate had gone in and had that initial work, people weren't, because oftentimes, right, when you go, people are afraid of government or they feel as though you're not going to listen to them. That trust was built and it became a whole meaningful process. So it's really important that, this can't be rushed. Again, knowing that when we do have the time, it's like, hey, you got a year. Just go start this process and, get people excited. Meeting community where they are. Again, Wednesday night at 7 o'clock or Saturday at 10 a.m. might not be the best time for everybody. There is no best time. And so you need to, if Group A has their standing meeting every third Thursday at 4 p.m., you go there. We're city employees. We're paid to be inconvenienced. So we need to do that. We need to make that effort. No dots. And I'm sure some of you know, like you go to an open house and they have a menu of options like skate park, and here's your dot. Leave it where you think is best. And it's like, it's a suite of ideas of nobody asks for or wants. So, I mean, again, it's just like, do the work.
I just did this, so this is.
It's like, do the work. Really go in there and like, what is it that we want, right? It's like, we want to have something to kind of have that Instagrammable moment, to have that wedding, to have that. And so, I mean, that's where you learn that. Identify and utilize community ambassadors. There are folks who are scared or indifferent or angry with government. And so, by working with folks like with Abraham, it's like, they're going to really get into that community that you're not going to be able to. And so really find those groups, those individuals who can help you, they know the passwords, they're going to get you in. Give community a seat at the table. Again, this isn't like something that we are doing to them. It's something we're doing with them. And so they should be here at the table and planning this out. And you see what happens because, when designers, have our expertise and think, this is the right thing, but it's like, well, yeah, maybe they do want this gateway. So let's see how we can make that happen. So make them a part of that process. Stay engaged. Again, how even though Kate is sort of sunsetting off the project, the other artists are coming in. So you want to continue that process. So, Kate blazed the trail for these 4 artists to come in and to do that work. And it's just easy for them because those relationships have already been established. Stay aware of emerging opportunities and resources. I mean, you can sort of see it how it's like late in the game, somebody comes up once, community's comfortable. They come up with an idea and it's like, didn't think about that. So, so I think always just keep your ear to the ground and, staying in touch with folks because you're going to learn a lot just by being available and being aware. And then turn problems into opportunities, of like, like the soil is like, what do we do with this? By just having that dialogue and those exchanges that you're like, yeah. And so, you become landforms and, it's much better for the environment, having trucks coming through to haul the dirt away. And you can kind of create interesting spaces for folks to see how are they going to use that, 10 years from now? How does that space get used in ways that you never imagined? So yeah, well, thank you for allowing us to be here and happy to have a conversation about this.
Thank you. So commissioners, I already said this is not an action or structured Q&A or anything like that. So just feel free to ask questions or talk about whatever aspect interests you.
Ben has a question.
And you might have covered this, but how are you funded or where does the funding for the arts?
It comes from the 1% for art program ordinance. And so, we get 1% from capital construction dollars from public facilities, Seattle City Light, SDOT, parks, yes. So yeah, we get, and so, again, when we just use, we guys all, thousands or hundreds of projects that SBU is working on,
Yeah.
a little bit comes in and it gets put into like a municipal arts fund. So it's all kind of put in one bucket. And so how we choose to use that, is up to how when we just sort of discuss what are the big projects, what are the objectives, what makes sense. And so taking, for like planning artists, it comes from that bucket of like, this is worth investing in for this project. So we'll go back towards it.
Does that mean you have 1% overall and you can allocate it? You can concentrate it on certain things?
Yes. So like, it's not like a 1-to-1.
It's not 1% of this project.
Yeah,
it is 1% overall.
Yeah, because a lot of projects are really small. And so it might be like, some kiosks that SDOT's putting in, it generates a little bit of money. And it's like, we can't do a percent project for $500 that kind of spit out. So yeah, it's all put in one bucket and then we sort of
That's great.
decide, how to, consolidate and use it most effectively.
So on that, that's a good explanation. So I worked for SDOT for a number of years. As you know, they just passed a $1.5 billion levy for the next 9 years. So going back to your future opportunities slide, when there's a big capital program out there that's being, developed, and I mean, a lot of those projects are probably already identified. How far in advance are you kind of looking for what those opportunities might be across and using the CIP to help guide that?
Yeah, I mean, we have liaisons with each of our partner departments. And so we're always discussing like what's coming up, what's big. And so, yeah, like working with our partner, Joshua Gong at SDOT is sort of, working with the levy and sort of, yeah, thinking ahead of what projects are coming, when they're gonna come online, and how we want to use it, and which projects do we want to, dedicate 1% for our funds towards. So, yeah, hopefully we'll have enough lead time to where, we could do this model if there is a community. I mean, because the planning artist model, I should also mention, is like, it's nothing we're gonna do at every project. We don't have capacity for that. But when there are communities that, have been ignored, or if it makes a lot of sense to have folks connected to this, then once we identify that with our partners, then we'll sort of initiate those projects.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense. Like you say, you don't want to wait till 60%, right? You want to sort of try to get out ahead as much as you can.
That's the thing, we're, talking with Valerie and Michael, like, how do we do more of that with our projects so that, we're ahead of ourselves, so that we're not just coming in at the end and just like, we're gonna do something great for you. Bye.
Particularly if the project is sometimes a lot of emphasis and hope can be placed on what the art can do to cover all of the concerns for community activation. And so, especially if you're waiting till the very end, and that's a lot of pressure on that one opportunity.
And I'm also curious, so related to that, when you're identifying the projects further out and when you're bringing on the planning artists, how much are you finding that the planning artists can help identify, or the arts team can help identify, where 1% budget goes for art and where there are project components where the artists may be able to work and expand their capacity, maybe in elements within the design on which art can be applied that are already part of the budget of the project? How much has that been a part of the planning artist conversation?
Not much, because this is just the third project that we've implemented this, and the other two weren't at the scale of Bitter Lake. So I think it's something to have further discussion with our partners, because also the thing is, we don't want to be problem solvers. We want to work with our partners, and because so it's like, what sort of counter who can you bring in on your end to work with our planning artists so that engagement's happening? Because again, we don't want to be like, oh well, arts is dealing with the community for us. We want this to be a partnership. So yeah, we haven't. This was the first one, so I think it'll influence how we move forward. So, but I think, it would be great if we could do that, because then, we could focus on the art, and if it does pop up in other areas, then sure, it's great. But it's also, if it helps the project itself, then even, just better. Because again, we're thinking more as a city project, not just SPD project, art project.
Yeah, I think on Bitter Lake, it's just the opportunity appeared, like with the mounds and the fence, that there was this void there, right? We had our landscape architect working on it, and there's only so much they could do. And then Kate was there, she was available, right? It's like, so, what's this idea, why can't we change this into art enhancements, right? Which made it a lot better.
And so in that specific scenario, both the fence and the landforms have some component of SPU and SPR funding, but also some portion of the 1% for public art funding that's related to them actually being developed.
Yeah, so with that one, the 1% for art came from Kate's role on it, helping those, and the fencing was all funded by SPU. And then with the mountains, it's Kate's involvement with helping with the design of that. And then like SPU's doing kind of the initial rough grading, and then Parks is going to come in and fine tune them to like where the POWs are and everything as they develop the park, and have Meadow come in as well. So it's been really a collaboration with three on.
Yeah, so sometimes when we have projects, it's not public art and public art alone. It might be like, well, we're building a fence. If you just have your artist, does a design only portion of it, then we'll take care of fabricating and installing it. So often, occasionally that happens where it's just design only, like with this, and that's it. Our partner will take it over.
I was kind of didn't mean to be snarky about the dot conversation, but I'm always curious about better ways of doing that. And we've been, exploring in my own practice, exploring some different ways to really dig into the culture of place, end user, client, whatever is there to kind of dig into. Can you tell us a little bit more about your process that you were talking about? And when you were referring to no dots and doing the work to get into like what people are looking for, what's appropriate, or however you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the no dots conversation. I'm really
Well, again, I mean,
How you do it.
it's just, you know, I'm a big like Dunning-Kruger type person, but, and you know, because it's like, on one end, it's like, you know, you don't know what you don't know, or being aware of what you don't know. But also it's on the other end of the spectrum that we often, you know, don't reference, is that experts tend to speak to others as if they're experts. And I'm always looking around at a lot of these open houses, and because you see like all these really nice design renderings and design options, and then people are just like, is this what you? So you know, so I think it's just really kind of thinking. You know, I think for us, we really need to take a look at ourselves and say, how are we presenting ourselves to the public? Are they truly understanding what this is? And they're just like, well, they're going to do what they want to do. So I guess that's fine. I think, you know, when we have folks who do this advanced work and really just get into a community and learn more from them, they're able to learn more about the project. Then, you know, it starts to make sense. And then, you know, there's just more of a, you know, it's organic sort of growth, but that of how this project develops, and you know, see how it happened here. So I think it's again, it's sort of thinking about how we build those relationships and how we take the time and the care to develop that.
Yeah, I think I can talk a little bit about that with our experience in working with parks and working with Kate. There was a lot of initial outreach, like when Kate was talking about P-patch, we learned about, hey, they really want this P-patch expansion, right? We weren't even really thinking about that, working with DON. So we started working with DON on the project as well. And there's a lot of initial outreach that we're doing for the reservoir, but we're also thinking about what parks needed, what some amenities people might want. So there's a lot of surveys and questions where my meeting with people went out. Parks kind of did some of their initial outreach too. So then their engineer and landscape architect came up with like 3 concepts that were like a little different. They had different kind of amenities. And when we went out to the public with those, we're explaining those, and we were like just getting feedback from them. And they're like, oh, I like this. Why are you doing like this? You know, that's stupid. I like this instead. So we're able to collect all that feedback that really informed parks and make them come up with like their preferred master plan and what it seemed like the community really wanted, instead of just shoving out in the community space. Here's what we're doing. Are we great or what? So I think on this project, we're really able to
Comment.
Just wanted to think directly to your question. It's the entire process, not just an event where you have people come in and make choices of pre-designed ideas. It's an iterative process. This is a design-oriented process focused on the user experience, on, you know, or the community experience of a place. And so this is the whole thing, as opposed to one event. Does that make sense? Because it's not a methodology, it's an attitude and an approach to engaging in place-based design.
And to that point, I would say, depending on the group that you're working with, they may want to communicate with you in different ways. So it's like the dot gives someone a role, you know? So it's like, that's important, but it's like, what if it's more like, okay, yeah, maybe this is a group that wants to do things with their hands, but maybe it's a wider range of being able to express their desire of how they want to be in the space, or maybe someone just really wants to talk for a long time. So it's like everybody has a different way of how they want to communicate. So giving like a range of ways that is a possibility as compared to one set activity.
At one set time.
At one
With
set
one
time.
set method.
Yeah.
The last week, we had a workshop with SDOT in our office. It was a play, plan, build, the methodology, a book of just sort of like this, of just getting away from our standard way of working. And I think they would just collect all this like junk, not junk, but just toys, like non-object, things that, they don't mean anything, not non-representational objects. And it was like, build your memory of like a great experience you had, build this, for your memory, build this like experience that you had. And so people are just using all these odd shaped forms and objects to kind of create something. And I think it kind of took away any sort of recognition thing and kind of got people to think about what was meaningful for them. And that was quite interesting. And definitely want to incorporate that and then, other future projects, because I think it really, it's like starting with that, just like really kind of, we're not thinking about, the pathway. We're not thinking about the structures, like just what are you thinking? And it was a great way to kind of get people to free up and just sort of talk about what was important to them. And then it kind of eventually led to what the design would be.
Is the artist involved in that whole process typically?
Which process?
Finding out what the project would be.
Yeah, for the artwork, yes, definitely. That's the objective, at least for us. And then I think in the future of working with SPU or any of our other partners is sort of, seeing where does this going to lead to, addition, again, the landforms of how and the fencing, does it turn into other areas of this project? So, but yeah, when we do it, like they're tasked with, it's focused just on the art.
I was just gonna add in, we often, I'm the arts liaison for SPU, and we often get asked, why can't we pick our own art? Like, why don't we just get to do it? And I think the difference is what they're describing versus engineers or economists or whoever works at SPU would use a very linear process for designing things. That's what we're good at. So being able to partner with folks who do art and have expertise within art means we get to have very different kinds of processes impact our, public infrastructure work. And I think that this is a really great example of how we would do this very, very differently. And it's a really different outcome.
Can you all speak to how when you have planning artists coming in quite early in these projects and acknowledging that throughout the course of a project, there's likely value engineering that occurs? Can you speak to how you ensure that some of those community outcomes that a planning artist is discussing with community are able to be kind of delivered and retain their importance throughout the life of a project and through its value engineering processes?
Do you have that literally, or
Um,
sort of expectation setting, or the folks in the work?
well, I mean, of course, I think people know that everything that they share isn't going to be reflected in a final public work. But I think, was that a question, Molly, more was it for me or?
I think it has two parts really.
Yeah.
So I think it is, one, there's the component of interfacing with the community themselves and like you're saying, kind of what are the promises we make compared to what are the things we're hearing and reflecting as part of a process and not necessarily promising, but then showing, making visible the ways to incorporate them. And then I think there's also, how do we retain the pieces that end up being most important to community, even as in many projects, some components can fall away in a value engineering process. And so how do we retain the things that were determined as most important to community? I'm curious, in any of these projects, what are the lessons learned associated with ensuring that the most important community outcomes carry through the end of the project?
I think that kind of happened with originally with the community itself, you identified, I think it was maybe like 7 different areas for art, and we kind of narrowed it down. They're like, probably took 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, was there a specific thing that helped in your mind narrow down which ones were most important to the community?
No, I mean, it was, that was the way that we prioritize it. Partially was through how people voted on it, but that I think was a little different though, because those projects were specifically through the percent for art. So value engineering isn't as much of a concern because it's
right.
a designated set of funds. Whereas when we hear people expressing a desire to have as much activation on the site as possible, and so that's why we come up with these like landform ideas to also respond to a need of this excess soil. But then it's coming from a design enhancement side where there isn't discretionary, like set percent funds, then it makes it more susceptible to value engineering.
I think everybody has a budget, but maybe this value engineering for the project doesn't affect that, but I would say that you have to get prices for all of your installations as well. And sometimes things
Yeah,
are prioritized, right?
yeah, I think, you know, we don't, with capital construction projects, I mean, we don't have the same scale
Yeah.
of budget, but I mean, you know, maybe still prices, but we haven't had that because, you know, the two projects that we have completed, Central District ones, I mean, they were relatively modest budgets that we did, you know, pretty much control of knowing what the costs would be. Especially with the mural, because the murals don't require a lot, but I think if anything, as far as expectations, it was to really kind of relate to the community. Again, this is on private property. We don't control the building, and so if it, you know, if it goes away, we have zero control over that. We can't stop it, and we can't force a new owner to do something. So I think it's just really kind of, you know, you do the best you can to kind of help folks. But I think, yeah, I mean, as far as art, it's less of a concern. I think we try to get to the call, you know, because that's where kind of all that work leads to, with like developing a scope of work and what the projects are. And then hopefully, you know, when the artists do come on, they kind of continue that down that pathway that's been created. So hopefully, you know, keep that core, the essential elements that the community develop throughout, you know, carry that forward into their projects.
So that's super clear with those 4 artists that came on through the calls who are clearly the 1% for public art. So thank you for that. I'm curious, so as well with the landforms, with the fencing, then how are those remaining a part of the design conversation such that is it really within parks that you have people who have been involved in the conversations alongside the artists and you have project managers who are committed to those elements? Have you found that that's kind of the way that you keep those driving through the process? I'm just curious, is it continued touch points with the Office of Arts and Culture? Is it individuals who really are carrying that with them through the project? Is it consultants? Is it agencies? Where have you seen that arts needs to remain involved? I'm just curious if there have been any lessons learned through that process with design teams when some of the things you hear from community aren't within the 1%. Because I think that's where we can often deliver the most, right? Is when it overlaps with the budget of the project itself. And so I'm curious if you've learned anything in that process that could help us be informed for these future projects.
Well, yeah, we haven't gotten there yet because we're still, you know, in the process of working with SPU and working with parks to like with the landforms. And so it's all, you know, that's a conversation that's happening now. And so having to kind of commit to that. So we'll know more in the future once we get to the finish line of the project. It's still 4 years.
But the departments, the capital departments do have a commitment to art. Like, I think it's pretty cool that SDOT has, you know, and
Yeah.
SPU, like that's a whole, you know, it's a value that is part of their organization. So it seems like that would make it easier for project managers who are, you know, dealing with these questions of the landforms or the fence or whatever, to be able to go back and say, but we have our master, you know, our plans and.
I think that's maybe where we can help make sure that those projects maintain those level of design. And, right, like we're going to see that and we're going to ask about the jail fence, right? And we're going to say, no, you said it wasn't going to be a jail fence. Prove it. right? I think we can help that continue. And maybe that's another question that we can ask. How can this organization help your organization continue to get those quality things, maybe not from the 1%, but from the 99% that we actually get to see and contribute. I love having an art commissioner. Unfortunately, she's not here today. But, I think that's a great way to keep that in mind on all the projects that we see. Do you have any thoughts on like what else we could be doing?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, because, yeah, I know that it's sort of, it's, you know, always focused on the design end of a project. And so what happens with construction is there that continued communication of like understanding, like, yeah, value engineering, see it, like, what happened to that part? And it goes, yeah, it's like, couldn't afford it. But yeah, so I think that continued dialogue with, you know, between the design commission and with capital departments to kind of, you know, make sure that, yeah, you know, we need to make sure that we deliver on these things that we hold to, you know, promise to communities. So yeah, any sort of continued dialogue and, you know, follow through would be great.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to Brian's point and question, I mean, I think we're always very interested in any capital project that comes before us. What have you been hearing from the community? What's important to them? And I think what I really liked about this model, as I understand it, is that your work was really integrated in that broader community outreach. So I think for projects that you're using this model, it would be great for us to be hearing that even early on, you know, at the initial, how is the community outreach? How is this being integrated in community outreach? How are you responding to the community? And as early as possible. I mean, I really, since our friends from Sound Transit are in the room, I really appreciated that on the West Seattle Station review, even if it was a PE, which is very early, but I appreciated that Barb was in the room and can come and speak to, well, we haven't done much yet, but here's what we're going to be doing. And, you know, that, I mean, that's kind of what I think we're always interested in hearing about. So even at the first review that we get of any capital project, whether it's SBU or Parks or SDOT, if this model is being used, it'd be great to know that and understand how it, you know, how it's being integrated with the broader community outreach and what you're hearing from them. We always ask those questions anyway.
Yeah, maybe a more pointed question is, you have certain projects that are on your radar as potential outlets or focuses for you and the 1%. If we see a project that has an obvious opportunity like that, do we have organizational to organizational connections with you guys that we could pass you this seems like an interesting one. It's a park with a reservoir and it needs a not jail fence.
Yeah, I think, because, you know, Valerie and Michael will often reach out to us.
Fantastic.
And also, you know, because we have Kate, who's unfortunately not here, and then Caitlin, who are on the Public Art Advisory Committee. I mean, the same thing. I mean, you know, there is a connection between the Design Commission and our office. So I think, you know, definitely, yeah. I mean, if something that slipped through the cracks when we were working with our liaisons and something that could be a good possibility for a project, and yeah.
That might be a good thing for us to put on as for our very first time projects. Just, is there an opportunity here? Thumbs up, thumbs down, and then get them involved.
Well, maybe wanted a question to follow up on that, but also one, I want to, as a person who carries a Pittsburgh passport, I'm thrilled that you mentioned Edith and her work in Hazelwood. It was a really important project for Pittsburgh and really transformative as well. And so it's great to see an inspiring work beyond. Second, though, I do, my question is really like, do you think this is the way you want to approach all of your work, or is it kind of a menu? Like sometimes you do it in a more, you know, without the negative aspects, but the other way, or is it sometimes, and then this sort of goes to the question, which is a related one, which is, I know you've worked on this, and I'm not trying to stir up trouble. But have you sort of workshopped the roles of landscape architect and planning artist? Because they're two that certainly as landscape architecture is taught today and considered today, there's a great deal of overlap potentially, and I'm sure you've thought about it. I just thought maybe just comment on that because I'm sure there's lessons learned. But so two questions really. One is this kind of what you'd always like to use, or kind of a menu? And then the second option, and then second is like the workshopping, kind of how you are continuing to learn, I'm sure, about how to make sure that that's a productive and not about conflict, but about positive outcome.
Yeah, for the first question, no, it's not something we would do for every project. It's budget and capacity. I mean, we are a very high functioning program. We manage 80 projects between 5 project managers. So it's just, we have to be very selective and, working with our partners. If we identify communities again, like Bitter Lake, the CD, that where it makes sense to do this, and we have, and working with our partners, we know that we do have the time, then definitely make those investments. So yeah, I mean, we just don't have, we can't do it for everyone. Not to say that, we can't think of other creative ways to just think more broadly about how we do community engagement and maybe thinking program wide, how we can incorporate some of those elements. So I think that's something that, project managers and I can sort of ruminate on. And then for others, I mean, yeah, I think it just as a model of, again, seeing the impact it has on people. Yeah, it'd be great if SPU or SDOT thought like, yeah, we're gonna have our landscape architect or, work with your planning artist, and they're gonna both go out and do that. Because, we don't have the resources to pay for a landscape architect, but if our partners do, then, that just is, again, it's just better for the city, it's better for communities. Yeah, I would love to see that be just a city process.
I think on Bitter Lake, they complemented each other, having Kate, having Aaron, they kind of really worked well together. They had different lenses they were looking at things for, and they kind of came from different directions on this. It was really successful, I think, having both along.
Phoebe or Zubin, do we have any questions?
No, I'm good. I just appreciated the presentation and discussion. It's been, just great to listen to. So yeah, I don't really have any particular questions.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's fun having Kate living on both sides of the table right there.
We had a question from Aja.
Hey, sorry, I wasn't sure if all the commissioners had had a chance to ask their questions, but is it okay that I ask now? Okay. So thank you so much. And I had a question in a similar vein for Kate, just thinking about a lot of the process that you laid out for sort of your engagement strategy is very similar to, I think, probably a lot of the work that engagement staff at the city probably strive to do or to incorporate into a lot of their work. And so I was curious, either just like for the whole team, kind of as part of the planning artist process, or Kate, specifically for you, did you work specifically with engagement staff, or was that one of the touch points within kind of the project team that you laid out as you were doing the work?
Thanks. That's a great question. It depended on the community that I was working with. For example, when doing outreach with the senior housing that was right across the street, a lot of folks didn't want to talk about art. They were like, I'm concerned about, construction and when is this happening? And so then it was like, okay, let's do a follow-up meeting where the whole team is there. So that was a moment where it was like, it was really necessary to have city representation. And then when doing work with North Star Permanent Housing, as Andy was alluding to, it was had much more productive conversation just to work with staff who were already on site to help with facilitating conversations with folks who were kind of, some like just wanted to do physical, like, they didn't want to really speak about the project, or, so it was, everybody kind of had different ways of wanting to relate to it. So it just tried to respond based on the community specific to it, if that makes sense. And I did want to say, thinking about Ben's dots.
I'm not gonna use them again.
Sometimes it does. I did
All
a
of
lot.
this one, by the way.
I did a lot of data.
I do think though that there's also a danger to over investing in community engagement on the front end if you're not going to follow through all the way through, because that promotes distrust in city engagement. It's like, oh, you were here in the beginning. There were so many great things. We did all these things, and then what happened? And so I think that's a great way to consider investment is what's like realistic, you know, for follow through. And maybe the scale of investment is to the scale of a dot. And if that is the case, there still is a way to figure out like, okay, we have 2 hours. So what is the constraint of our project? And what is the area where we still can have play and open-ended discussion and frame it that way? And I think I respect that approach, because I think it's actually sometimes more disappointing and can lead to some of that damage that you spoke to in your first slide, Jason, when it's over promise and under deliver.
Right. Thank you. That's super helpful.
I don't have a question, but I just have a general comment. Thank you for the presentation. I think this planning artist program is a great way to integrate art like truly into a community. Oftentimes, public art seems like an afterthought in design. But this program ensures that community voices are involved from the beginning. This program also recognizes the potential for art to serve as a unifying framework that connects architecture, landscape, and community vision, resulting in a more meaningful and culturally grounded public space and design. I also appreciate that this program is prioritizing public art in underrepresented communities, like around Bitter Lakes. I was born and raised in South Beacon Hill and near the Rainier Beach area. So I firsthand know that neighborhoods like mine have historically not received the same level of investment in public art as wealthier, predominantly white neighborhoods. So it's really encouraging to see programs like this as a way to correct these disparities. And I hope moving forward, communities similar to mine in Bitter Lake receive the same level of funding, care, and creative attention as other projects around the city has had, like Holly Anderson Park or Volunteer Park Reservoir.
Question on the, you had that mural that I think everyone, ooh, that was really beautiful mural. How long does something, it's paint, and it's outside, and is there like a budget for restoring or freshening it over time, or do you just kind of let it, sometimes weathered murals are cool too, so I don't know what, I'm just curious. This is a really new one, really small question, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's historically, our office avoided murals because of the nature of the material, and it's not, okay. We tried to, see it, as an experiment back in 22, when we did that, just to sort of see, like, can we do murals? And the answer is no. Because, I mean, here we're doing what we have a contract with a graffiti mitigation, repair company, but it's like $300 a month. And so it's just like, we did 2 murals, like, okay, we're done. I mean, it's, or it has to be something where, we have done, like the Black Lives Matter mural that we did in Capitol Hill, where we had a contract with the artist for 5 years. Like, maybe in 5 years, you may not want to be a part of this anymore. Like, you're done with it. But some artists even expressed some apprehension of when we redid it. We already said what we had to say. We don't, but they came back collectively and said, yeah, we'll do it. But it's it required maintenance every year. And it is expensive, but I think even now the artists are ready to move on. So we're trying to figure out what the future of that is. But yeah, for murals, like that's when we do have a service like just taken care of. But even then, it was only with the artist. Our contract was for 5 years, and then we have an option with the artist. Like, do you want to continue or do you want to just be done with it? So, but of course, community is beloved now by the community, and so good luck trying to take it down. Because the hard part with maintenance there, of like say like Hammering Man, if it needs to be painted, we can just hire a painting company and it's black, right?
Right.
With the murals, like we can't repair that. The artist has to do it, and so if they move across the country, then it's like. So
There's anti-graffiti coatings, but I know they're expensive too, and they don't last forever either, so.
Yeah.
Is it graffiti is that your main, is graffiti the main form of abuse on those kinds of murals?
Yeah, mostly. Of course, ultimately it's like, wet, dark, cold weather. It's lichen and whatnot on it.
We're out of time, but I just want to second what Caitlin said about where I see the potential of this that really overlaps with what the commission is always saying, which is, how to bring together all of the different fields and unite the design behind one bigger idea. So how to get landscape architects and engineers and everybody to come together toward one thing. And this just seems like a model for that. And I think, even if you don't use the model exactly, but taking lessons from that, I wanted to ask about like, how was the artist involved in the interdepartmental team and technical things like that, but I didn't, but just what can we learn so that everybody isn't in their silo investing their money and not pulling it together to create something really beautiful.
And then their silo doing public engagement just separately too, because that happens a lot at the city and that it seems like it did on this project so much, which is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to be here. Hopefully, talk more in the future about how we can expand on this.
Yes.
Valerie, are we adjourned?
Yep, we're adjourned.
All right.
We didn't get to talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's like, yeah. Bring it up.
Bye. Thank you, Robin.
Trying to get through everything.
Yeah.